when we are aligned with what is, right? There's no struggle, there's no conflict, there's no interpretation. We are not trying for anything. We don't want anything to be different. It's a moment of presence, right?
Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, Explorers, to Awareness Explorers. Always great to have you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm the co-host, Jonathan Robinson, and I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And we're excited to have Neelam, who's a spiritual teacher. I'll talk about her in a moment, but it's always great to have a spiritual teacher of some renown and who is someone who her teacher was somebody that I met, and we'll talk about that. But let me say a little bit about Neelam before we say hello. Neelam is a deeply awakened spiritual teacher who directly transmits the true experience of presence or our true nature. She's a direct disciple of H.W. Poonja, affectionately known as Papaji. And Neelam's teachings on the role of the nervous system in awakening and freedom are the missing link of non-duality and our quest for spiritual awakening and freedom. Neelam is a native of Poland, living right now in New Mexico, who has been giving satsang internationally since 1995. And you can find out more about her teachings at Neelam, which is spelled NEELAM.org. And welcome to Awareness Explorer, Neelam.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Welcome.
Yeah. I went to one of your satsangs recently, and it was beautiful. It reminded me a little bit of my time with our fellow acquaintance, Poonja, and we were talking before the show that I was there in 1992 at his home or ashram in India. How did you come across Poonja?
You know, it's a little long story, so I'm going to try to keep it short.
Okay.
But I really had this very strong desire for truth, which I didn't really recognize even at that time for what it was. And I have been with other teachers before, one of them being Mother Mira.
Hmm.
And I used to spend really long times in blissful meditation. I would sit for hours and hours and hours in bliss. However, when I would get up from the blissful meditation, I would experience extreme suffering.
Hmm.
And that dichotomy, you know, at some point I remember just lying down and this thought arose within me that said, I want to find someone who can show me what is beyond this, you know, what is beyond this dichotomy of bliss and suffering. And very soon after, in the house where I was living, somebody brought a flyer of Gangaji. You know, Gangaji, a disciple of Papaji, who used to travel back then. She used to travel and she used to stay in the area for a month. She used to stay and do satsangs, you know. So
and we interviewed Gangaji on Awareness Explorers, and we're both big fans of her.
Yeah. And I looked at that flyer, you know, and I read it and I thought, well, she's a Western woman. She didn't spend like years in the ashram somewhere, you know, and she had this amazing experience. And so I went to see her. That's a little longer story too, but
we don't
eventually, mind. Yeah, okay. So I went, you know, and the first time I went, the love was so overwhelming in that satsang that my little ego just kind of shrunk a little bit. And I decided to stay away for a couple of meetings, you know.
Mm.
But then the urge, the desire for truth was really stronger than that. And I went back. And when I went back, my mind just completely dropped, you know. It just completely dropped into like just ongoing spaciousness. Just, you know, the nectar of our true nature just kind of constantly revealing itself. So eventually I have written a letter to Gangaji and described this she invited me to sit with her and read the letter to everybody, which was amazing because just seeing the ocean of love, just looking back at me through so many different eyes. And so I remained in the satsang with her for a few more days. And at some point I saw, she always has the picture of Papaji when she sits there. And at some point I really saw Papaji, like as if for the first time, and I realized this is my teacher and I have to go to India. So
What year is this, Neelam?
94.
94, huh? Yeah.
So maybe 6 months later, I found myself in India with Papaji. Maybe 4 or 5 months later, I was in India with Papaji. So.
And what was that first experience of Papaji like?
And even before we go there, because I had this connection with Ramana before, a really strong connection with Ramana Maharshi. And then as I was considering to go to India, again, the mind arose and said, well, you haven't started your life yet. Maybe you have to get married and have children, and maybe you have to do this, and maybe, and that night, Papaji came in a dream. He came in a dream and he gave me this yellow rose. And he said, cut through the dream. And so I realized, this is all just past and I'm going to India. So I went to India. It's hard to describe Papaji because it's like, I used to say it's like Star Trek, presence, incredible presence in this human body, which to me, it was like everything you ever dreamed of and everything you maybe even subconsciously thought could be true. It actually is true, because here it is, it's an embodiment of presence, and such an incredible presence, so, I mean, words are very, very, very small and very difficult, to describe what it was like to sit in Papaji's presence. So,
My experience with him was, I always felt like he was about to he was barely able to hold together all his joy. It really felt like there was so much joy moving through him that it was hard for his body to contain it. And of course, that's contagious when you're around that.
of course, joy, presence, whatever we call it,
Yeah.
spaciousness, our true nature. So, yeah, of course, yes.
And how long were you around him? I know he didn't he die in 1995?
No, later 95. Yeah, I was there in 94, so maybe later in 95. I'm not sure right now of the date.
Yeah.
But I was there 5 months.
Oh, wow. That's a long time.
When I went there, and it was so amazing and so incredible. And I remember talking to a friend in satsang and saying, we are so lucky. We are so lucky to be here because there's so much stuff going on and so many different, teachers and teachings and different things. And here we are here, we are not somewhere. We are here, But I went and I had a ticket for just a month to stay there a month. And very quickly I realized, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here as long as needed, I'm just going to, this is, I just have to be here. So
I'm wondering, what you see as how much transmission is part of this process of what we might call awakening, because obviously he and Ramana offer tools like who are you, but is it important to have a guru or a transmission?
It happens sometimes people wake up spontaneously without a teacher. That happens, We can also look at Ramana. Ramana's experience was spontaneous. He obviously had so much momentum for that experience from his past lives that it just naturally happened at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't need a teacher in the body, right? However, I would say for most of us, something is missing. And what I can speak from my own experience and from the experience of so many people that I know, many of my students that woke up, what was missing was really an element of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because awakening started to happen in my experience a couple of times at least before I met Papaji. But then there will be a moment of pulling back, because as I realized later that certain amount of trust was missing. So when I went to see Papaji in the beginning, I was really sitting there a little bit in my own spiritual arrogance. I have had so many spiritual experiences. I have spent days and days in bliss and so on and so forth. And so I was sitting a little bit in my arrogance, with my hands crossed at front of my chest, kind of, and waiting, like, what are you going to show me? What are you going to give me?
Give me your best shot.
Right. And I wasn't even aware of that fully. You know what I mean? It was so subconscious, this kind of little bit of a posture, a little bit of a holding back. And only after meeting another teacher who spoke about her, it was actually Shanti Mai, she passed away not long ago. She was speaking about her devotion to her teacher. She was speaking about how she gave up her whole life, how she left her children, how she left everything behind and just totally devoted herself to her teacher. So I went back to Lucknow and I realized I have to follow every little movement that arises in my heart, and I have to just go for it. I have to just keep following it and not listen to the mind and just do whatever comes moment by moment, and that eventually led me to a moment of full trust, and that was followed by awakening.
Well, there's two terms there that I'm fascinated by. One is trust in what?
Trust has many layers. There's the trust in truth. There's trust in the teaching itself. Like to know beyond any doubt that you are this, that there's nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you are spaciousness or consciousness or our true nature, right? Trust in the words of the teacher, like what Papaji was saying over and over and over and over again. But there is also the human level of trust, right? We all bring certain experiences. We have all certain human experiences in life. And we sometimes experience events in the past that didn't lead us to trust, that led us to be a little bit more cautious and a little bit more removed. Even when if you would have asked me when I came to Lucknow, do I trust what Papaji is saying? I would say, sure, of course I trust. But the truth was I wasn't, you see.
Mm-hmm.
The truth was there was an element there that just wasn't trusting yet.
Mm-hmm.
And only after following every movement, like I want to sing for Papaji. I want to write a song. I'm not a singer. I'm not a writer. I want to sing a song for Papaji. I want to go and visit him in his house. I want to, and so on and so forth, just following that momentum, following that movement that arose in my heart. And that led me to, at some point, like I wanted to go and sit at Papaji's feet when he was giving satsang. And so I have written a letter and I said, Papaji, I just want to come and sit at your feet when you are sitting in satsang. And he said, sure, okay, come. And as I was sitting there, just deeply in resting, but also listening to what he was saying. And he was really giving advice, on so many levels. He was not just pointing to the absolute, but he was also telling people about the relationships and about this and about that. And as I was sitting there, there was a moment in which I realized, I can absolutely, completely trust what he's saying.
Mm.
And that evening was the evening of the awakening, that moment of full trust when finally, everything in me just relaxed, like I can completely trust. I can trust completely what he's saying. And I believe, because back to your question, do we need a teacher in the body? I believe that in my experience, that what was necessary, you see, that element was missing, right? And it was necessary to experience that. So.
That is so beautiful to hear and beautifully described. And I imagine that another element, which I think might be part of trust, is just to backtrack a little. We were talking before we started recording that you used to come to New York a lot, and I went to every time you came. I went to hear you and sit with you in New York, and it was so marvelous. But after all these years, there's one word that I came away with that I just was burned on my memory, was okayness. And it seems so central, and I suspect that it is the flip side, or even somehow involved in the concept of trust. Because when you know everything is okay, then trust may just blossom by itself.
Sure. When we speak about awakening and like what's really needed for awakening, there are several things I would say are true, because all of those elements had to come together. Even in my own experience, there had to be the desire for truth, there had to be discrimination, and there had to be birth in a human body, there had to be, capacity to be here, capacity of the nervous system to be here, there had to be trust, right? So there are so many, different elements. But when you speak about okayness, when you are at rest, when we are at rest in our true nature, we know that everything is okay just the way it is. We might not be consciously thinking that, right? We might not be, but when you are here, you are naturally, there is no conflict. There is no like, oh, this should be different, or that should be different, or my experience should be different. So in a way, okayness is a symptom of our true nature.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are truly okay, not because so many people have the false kind of okayness. We also have already spiritual conditioning, like I'm supposed to be okay. It's supposed to be, it's very spiritual to be okay with everything. But I don't care for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we are truly in the okayness, then we know that's our true nature. And when there is no okayness, it's such a powerful, discrimination. When there is no okayness, we know that the past is present.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what the mind tells you, because the mind can tell you any number of stories. It can tell you, you are okay, you are not okay, this is great, this is terrible, this should be different. Mind can, what I mean, present you with any number of interpretations. But in your heart, it's you, are you okay? Are you at rest with what is really here or not, you see?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, that's it. That's your true nature. There may be symptoms, there may be things going on, thought, feeling, emotion, sensation, but you still know, everything is okay. Or no, it's not okay. It's not okay. To realize that things are true, that we are truly in not okayness, that's a beginning of being present. That's really a beginning of returning to our true nature, when we truly can say, honestly, naturally, no, this is not okay. And that's a beginning of coming back to our true nature. So
Is it because that we notice our true nature? Is it because our true nature is already okay, even if
that's
the
right.
mind body thinks it's not?
That's right. And also the moment of when we are aligned with what is, right? There's no struggle, there's no conflict, there is no interpretation, we are not trying for anything, we don't want anything to be different. That's a moment of that's a moment of presence, right?
Mm.
You know, even if the message is this is not okay, right? That's already a moment of presence because there is no manipulation of what is, right?
I love that phrase, no manipulation. As a matter of fact, I was told that someone went to a retreat of Adyashantis and there was a sign on the wall that said, no manipulation.
That's right.
And I thought
That's
that
right.
was so
Which
succinct.
I know, which the mind is so good at, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Well, that's its job and it's useful for some things, but not for this.
not for this, not for no, yeah, yeah, not for our true nature. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned in that answer the nervous system. What is the role of the nervous system and the brain in awakening?
You know, this is a very interesting question because I wasn't really aware of this so in such a detail before. However, I was aware that there was a difference between really understanding practically what does it mean to be here. When past arises, when we get affected and there is thought, feeling, sensation, emotion, when tendencies of the past arise, right? And you experience thoughts and feelings and sensations and emotion. You know, we often say to people, just be here, right? But most people don't understand what that means, you know, just be here, right? And one of the ways of being here is to be able to actually experience what arises. Because past arises, right? Past arises, we can engage in it. That's called, you know, we get involved and we just reenact the past, right? We can try to suppress the past. Many people have tried. Many spiritual, even some types of spiritual traditions have tried to suppress the past. It doesn't really work, right? It comes back with a vengeance. Or this is inquiry or presence. We could experience it as it arises.
How would you say that's different than what most people are doing?
I'm not sure of what when you say what most people are doing, in what sense?
Well, I'm
You mean like
thinking,
general population of people or
yeah,
the
yeah. Somebody listening to this might say, well, of course I experience what arises. When this happened, I got annoyed. What are you saying that they might do different than that?
experience what arises means to be present to what is here,
Mm-hmm.
to be present without any agenda, without any movement, without having for anything to be different, and without engaging in it either.
Well, I think the key phrase there is without having it or needing it to be different, that there's a acceptance and there's no resistance to what's arising.
Acceptance and willingness also, you know, I call it willingness to just be present, you know, to not to avoid it, to not to suppress it, to not to manipulate it in any way, not to try for it to be any different, you know, just to allow it to be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds very, very simple, but it's not always easy, right?
Yeah.
And then how does the nervous system play involved in that?
And that not easy part is because when past arises, there's not only the past tendency that is present, but there's oftentimes a reactivity to that, right?
Mm.
Past arises, and before you know, there is some reactivity, and that causes some more, you know, reactivity, and off we go into more and more into suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say anybody had some challenging experiences in the past, and that affected their nervous system and brain in a way that they have a challenging time to be present when past arises, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be trauma, it could be health issues, it could be, you know, conditioning, we don't know. There could be many, many reasons why the nervous system and brain are in some way compromised. in its why the nervous system and brain is compromised in its ability to experience what arises. You know, there's so much more information, you know, brain plasticity and all this, you know, the science is catching up with this for many years right now of like, you know, what does it mean to have capacity in the nervous system to experience what arises, right? Just to give you like a practical example, what was Jonathan speaking about? I'm annoyed, energy, heat in the body, sensations, thoughts that may lead to certain actions too. I'm really annoyed. I'm going to do this and that. Or what's going on, you know? Mm-hmm. What would it be like if we just stopped for a moment and instead of thinking about it, notice the sensation in your body? What is actually present right now on the level of sensation? Which sensation directly speaks to the reptilian part of your brain, where fight, flight, freeze, overwhelm, collapse, all these, you know, more instinctual impulses live, right? So when you notice sensations, you begin to communicate with your brain and your nervous system. And sometimes it takes a second, sometimes a little longer, but suddenly we are back in the present experientially. We are not anymore in the interpretation. We are not anymore in the mind. We are not anymore in the throes of the emotional response, you know, which can be very volatile, right? We are just simply through the communication with the nervous system and brain, through sensation, we are immediately back into, here we are. That's what's happening. We are here. That's what's going on right now, you see. Mm-hmm. It's very, very simple when we know how to do it. Not so very easy when we don't know. You know, we just say, just be here. Well, if there's a lot of reactivity going on, what does it mean, just be here, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I call it the missing link, right? It's the link, this is the missing link between our desire for truth and between our actual ability to be here in a moment, you know, like what does it look like in a moment, right? Especially when past is present, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the fact that you mentioned sensation seems so key to it, because sensation without the story, without the words, can only be felt in the body, and it can only be now.
That's right. That's right. So sometimes it takes a second, right? Sometimes it might take a longer if there is a lot of habits and a lot of, you know, activation, but it brings us back into the present, right? And to understand that nervous system and brain, that how it works, how we can help it to be here. If we just understand this, we can, you know, it's compassion, it's kindness to help it, right? To do something for it. So
when you have difficult sensations and you know, triggering from the past, do you suggest that people have any particular for lack of a better word, I'll call it manipulation, like even loving the sensation or welcoming it is a slight manipulation? Do you recommend anything like that?
You know, what I recommend is first notice. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds very simple, but again, so much of the time we are in it, but we are not noticing. Become aware. Even if you have to say to yourself, past is present, or even if you have to say to yourself, I'm really triggered right now, or there's a lot of activation present, because noticing is the key, that this is the first thing, right? You know what Papaji used to say, whatever you can see is not who you are, right? Mm. So if we can, first things first, be aware of what is present, right? Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is enough. Just a moment of awareness. Awareness is so powerful, right? The moment you pay attention to anything, even just for a moment, it's like, whoa, you know? But a lot of the time, there is already a lot going on in the physical body. There's sensation, and there's thought, and there's feeling, and there's emotion. So notice first, right? And then can you simply, this is a very, very subtle and very specific commitment, can you just notice sensation in your body just the way it is right now? Nothing special, nothing, complicated, whatever it is right now. Maybe, what would you say, Jonathan, right now? Any sensation that is present at this moment,
Mhm.
just start anywhere, right? Beautiful. So wherever you start, tell me, wherever you start, right? Immediately you see something happens in that nervous system brain situation, and it begins to orient itself by here, right? Rather than by the past, right?
Mhm. That's a good
Does that
description.
does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's like the noticing is the first thing, but there's one other thing that I want to say, and that is wrongness. Wrongness is the symptom of the past.
Mm.
So anytime a sense of wrongness arises, I'm wrong, I did something wrong, this is wrong, the world is wrong, it should be different. For sure, I guarantee this 100%, it's a symptom of the past. So it's another way in which we have to see it. We have to recognize it for what it is. See, discrimination is so important. See, past is present, I'm triggered. You are wrong, it's terrible, you did something, you shouldn't be. This is the past. Can't really go there either, you see.
Mhm.
Can I be here?
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautifully described. And it seems like what you're talking about, it turns our attention away from the world outside or from our thoughts about the past and our thoughts about the future and
That's right.
to sensation now
That's right.
without
That's right.
without our all of our strategies to change now.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes people come to satsang and they are ready. They don't need a lot of, in between. They are just ready, they just catch on fire like that. But many of us come and we need something, you know what I mean? And that is one of those missing, I call it missing link, because sometimes people need to really understand, like, oh yeah, that's how I can be here,
Mhm.
So.
You mentioned earlier, Neelam, that you had, before meeting Papaji, a fair amount of meditation and bliss. So I'm wondering, when you had this awakening with him, what actually do you feel changed in you?
Dramatic change, absolutely dramatic change that wasn't visible on the surface. And ultimately it was, ultimately if you see, of course it was. But, on the inner, I would say, I went in with a fist closed and I came out like this.
Mm-hmm.
And the change is that, awakening is really beyond everything. So when I speak about awakening, I mean a permanent shift from identifying yourself as this body to knowing yourself as presence. And I say permanent because on the way we can have a lot of experiences that we can call awakenings,
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay to call it that, but I just want to clarify what I mean by awakening, right? Because in that moment, it's just something really burned completely through. Sitting, that's an interesting story. You want to hear a little bit of the story?
Yes,
Of how it
please.
came? After that satsang, I went to eat with somebody, India, a restaurant on the roof. And I start to feel the fear of death arising.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that resistance to wanting to experience that. So it comes up and goes back down and comes up and goes back down. And then I leave that restaurant and I walk out on the street. And 3 little Indian girls come up to me wordlessly, and they each give me a little flower. And in that moment, just my heart just opens, and I know, like, I just have to go and sit and just let it come, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to where I was living, and I sit, and it's just so fast. The fear of death arises, the desire to be at Papaji's feet. And as I'm sitting there, still with my eyes open, the world starts to disappear. The world disappears and the body disappears.
In that moment, something shifted.
And then coming back from that, only then there is bliss and there is, recognition, but, and there is, there's a deep sense of okayness, right? But in that moment, there's nothing, there's nothing at all, there's nothing, nobody, nothing, no nothing, It's very, very difficult to describe in words.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what changed, what I didn't really realize immediately, because then, it took hours and hours and hours of sitting just in bliss and just sitting, and then I have written a letter to Papaji about this, and I go to satsang the next morning, and I walk into the satsang hall, and as I walk in, I realize, everything arises in presence. The satsang arises in presence, Papaji arises in presence, Neelam arises in presence. As before, there was Neelam and Papaji was out there, and there was something, and there was the sat, and there was the, and now everything is just arising here. Mm-hmm. No separation. So.
Does that have to be for everybody? Because I imagine everybody is slightly different. Does that have to be one moment? For example, you have a video called Everything is a Projection of Our Mind, and you said in every moment we can bring our attention to the spaciousness of a true nature.
Of course.
But you went on to say there doesn't have to be this final disidentification, because in a moment by moment, we actually have a choice to bring our attention to the spaciousness of our true nature.
That's true, Brian. However, when we talk about awakening, it is really a moment. Mm-hmm. I have spoken to so many people, so many of my students have had this experience, but it's a moment in which really there is a, like as before, there was a continuous desire for truth, right? There was a desire to know. This is the function of the desire for truth, to know our true nature. And that stops, that just you simply know, like, that's it, it. There's nothing else to know. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying awakening is the end, because it isn't, right? In a certain way, it's just the beginning, it's mm-hmm. just a tiny little step into reality. But before awakening, there was this drive, to know. And now it's like, that's it, it's over, mm-hmm. That part is over. Right? Mm-hmm. That part, and that's why, I say permanent shift. Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, once you know there is no Santa Claus, you can never believe in Santa Claus again.
That's right. Once you know who you are, then you can't believe anything else, but it's because it's also beyond belief. It's not based on what we think, but it's just your experience, right?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that awakening is really just the beginning of, call it the next phase, and life presents many challenges. I know you have health challenges, people have money challenges. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on. What do you see as either your or the phase after this shift happens, where you realize your true nature?
Well, it really depends from person to person in a way, because everybody has different life experience, right? I would say for me, it's just abidance, it's just simply knowing what I know, and that's it. You know what I mean? There isn't any big dramatic, doing about anything, right? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it is really just a much, it's hard to speak about it in words, but I would say a much deeper willingness and capacity to be present to what arises, right?
Mhm.
Even
You
if
know,
that's suffering.
that's and I would be careful about that word suffering
Or painful rather than suffering, because
there is
suffering,
there's really a difference between pain and you know, I remember, you know, my health challenges were so extreme that when they happened, it looked like my whole world changed in a way of like not being able to do anything that I was able to do before, you know.
Mhm.
And yet I remember, you know, I wasn't able to eat much. I was just like able to just drink some chicken soup, and I was laying on the floor trying to eat this chicken soup and thinking, here I am just learning how to eat a chicken soup while I'm lying down on the floor, right? So, you know what I mean? It's like, on the one hand, there's a lot of challenging experiences. On the other, when you're really relying on your true nature, when you're really resting here, I'm not saying it's easy, but honestly, I don't know how people do it without it, you know?
Mhm.
I don't know how people can go through extreme challenges when they don't have that trust and that anchor in our true nature.
Well, that's suffering. That's true suffering.
That's definitely suffering. Yes, yes,
Yeah, I've
definitely.
always thought of the difference between pain and suffering is that pain is going to happen. It's part of the human experience. Suffering is
That's
the
right.
idea that it shouldn't be.
That's right. That's right. It should be different, right?
Yeah.
And I always say tough luck, you know, or good luck with that, right?
Yeah, good luck with that.
That's right. The reality is the way it is. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm curious about something in your teaching of your students. I've come across this many times in various satsangs and meetings with various teachers that some people claim that there's a dryness that's set in where a person loses all interest in any activity of the world. And now I haven't experienced this firsthand, but I've always been curious about it and wondered what causes it and how to help people who present it as a problem.
You know, the dryness, that's some kind of misunderstanding, right?
Uh-huh.
When a dryness sets in, and you mean like after awakening or before awakening or just in general,
I
or
think what happens is that people realize that they withdraw their attention from the world, and then they think somehow the world shouldn't be interesting to them anymore.
but that's the mind, you see,
Yes,
that is the mind, that this is not a true experience.
right.
Because in a true experience, everything is, right?
Mhm.
Everything exists. There is no separation. You know that saying, to be in the world and not to be of the world, right?
Mhm.
You're still in the world, but your attention is on something different. Your attention is within, but it doesn't mean you are separating yourself from the world, right?
Right, right.
So the dryness, that's really it's just another idea. You know, I remember when I came back from India, from being with Papaji, and all I could do is sit, you know, in bliss again. I just couldn't do anything. And then I would just wake up in the morning and like pick up like a little book that had Papaji picture on it or Ramana picture, and I would just look at it, and that would be just the extent of, you know, activity for me or sitting, you know. And then I remember somebody invited me to watch a movie, and they brought some popcorn, and there was a moment of hesitation, you know, within, like, is that okay?
Mhm.
Is that okay to engage in a world? And that night, Papaji came in a dream, and he brought me a huge ball of popcorn. He was smiling, you know, and I realized it's just another idea, right? It's just another trap, you know, you can't engage it. Well, the world is here, right? Everything is here. So, yeah,
Yes, what a beautiful example. That's exactly what I was
I know.
talking about. And even
Just so,
our talents and strengths, we can even if we may not, even if we may know that our true nature isn't the personality, the body and stuff, the body does have talents and strengths and weaknesses, and the world does have things that are interesting and enjoyable.
and the world just is also, you know,
Yeah,
like we
just
can't,
is.
trying to make it any different would be an effort, and an effort would eventually result in not being able to sustain. We can't sustain effort. I'm just wondering, I'm going to turn it around to you guys. Like, I'm just wondering, what is it like for you, these days? Or do you have any, what is that like for you, Brian, or for you, Jonathan? Like,
Well,
what really?
for me, when I stopped trying to fix what was wrong with me, because I thought I was fundamentally flawed.
I know, that's such a misunderstanding.
Right. When I stopped that, and when I knew for certain that when I looked in and just stepped back and I just be what the sort of wordless, spacious noticing of everything, that that I that my enjoyment of the world also increased at the same time. It
That's
was
right.
kind of paradoxical in a way. And so I have fun most of my waking hours.
Beautiful.
Even when I'm in pain, like I have some
That's
physical
right.
challenges
That's
now
right.
too, but I enjoy anyway.
Yeah, beautiful. Just being here, right? Being here is so great.
Yeah. How about
It
you,
makes it easy.
Jonathan?
How about you,
Feel
Jonathan? How are
a
you?
little bit like a ping pong ball going between the
Huh,
acceptance and peace of my true nature and hitting upon triggers that come from I'm pretty active in the world. I'm
sure, sure.
doing a bunch of stuff. So it's many times a day back and forth between those two. And they're very different. So there's that little bit of a uh, uh, you know disorientation going between those two worlds so frequently. So that's often my experience.
Right, right. And that's where the understanding of that missing link, whatever we call it, I call it capacity of the nervous system to be here. That could be really, really helpful
Hmm.
to you to know that there actually is something you can do about this,
Yeah.
that you could be present to it in a different way, and eventually when the capacity deepens, then it doesn't really do this back and forth so much anymore, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Or they're not so disparate. Like when yesterday I was triggered. I have a health issue now, and a couple other things happen, and feeling that energy, I just sat with it, and of course it dissolves into just beingness after a few seconds.
Sure, of course,
So
of course, of course.
but sometimes I don't want to stop, like I want to get the thing done, and
I get it. I get it.
yeah,
That's the world, right?
yeah,
It
right.
pulls us into this, for sure.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
curious,
as long as there is no suffering, as long as there is no suffering, I stop at, suffering, right?
right,
Mhm.
right. Well,
And
suffering is the alarm clock. Suffering shows you there's something
Sure,
there that
sure.
you could have a different way of being right now.
That's right.
yeah, and also I don't want to give anyone the impression that I never get triggered like Jonathan. I never have fear or anxiety. It's just that what's happened is that it almost has become second nature to notice right away what notices that and what
Sure,
what is
sure,
already okay with it, even if the Brian character thinks it's not okay.
sure, sure. Well, that's good. That's helpful. Yes, that's very direct inquiry, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Being a female teacher was a pretty unique thing 30 years ago.
Sure.
And I'm wondering what you can say. Teachers traditionally were so much more male, and you and Gangaji and Byron Katie is really a new experience, I think. And I'm
Sure.
wondering how that's been for you, kind of being on the cutting edge of that.
I never really paid attention to it much, honestly, to tell you the
Mhm.
truth. Just because being in the body, being in a female body all my life, that's just really how it is. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And also just being in the body while you know yourself as presence, you realize that it's just a body, right? That it doesn't have, any other meaning than just being here, right? Like any other body would, you know. So I never really gave it too much thought in that way, you know. However, I believe, and these qualities are not just female. I believe that male people or teachers can have them also. There is definitely, you know, maybe more focus on kindness or tenderness, or, you know, I call it kindness or tenderness. Some people call it compassion, you know, and some people, as a reflection to me, because that's, you know, I don't really experience myself from the outside, but as a reflection, they really relate to and gravitate towards that, what they experience as kindness, what they experience as compassion, what they experience as tenderness, you know, which for me is just natural, and or, you know, I don't really see it just as a female, you know, quality, right? So, but sure, it was interesting, but again, not in that aspect. For me, it was just interesting because the satsang was happening, you know, it wasn't because of this or that. So.
Having been around both male, well, you're right that there's a spectrum of what you could call more male energy and more female energy. They often don't correspond so much to the body. But for a while, I was around a teacher that was very, you know, truth focused, very like warrior like. And then being around female teachers or even somebody like Adyashanti, who has more of a compassionate, kind presence, was very balancing and healing for me.
Yeah, and you know, something that these days we can call like a trauma-informed way of communicating or teaching, right? With the awareness of the sensitivities of humans and their nervous systems and brains and their past. And I find that, you know, maybe sometimes with this very straightforward, harsh approach, we can break through things more easily. But I don't believe that lasts. You know, that the breakthrough can be kind of more, you know, awakening in a moment, but does it really penetrate, you know? And I find that with kindness, people have more lasting experience or more lasting results, you know, because there's a natural integration that happens, you know, with that. So.
Yeah, I like how you said that. And there's a natural, we're aiming for openness and spaciousness, and kindness is closer in a way to that than a warrior-like mentality.
Yeah, and I have seen people really traumatized by comments, you know, of teachers that I didn't think were necessary in that way. It's the same can be achieved in a different way, you know. So.
Yeah, well said.
Kindness penetrates, you know, kindness, a true kindness really penetrates. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Is there anything that we haven't asked that you would like to talk about? I know you've done a lot of work with helping people with nervous systems that might be activated and helping them. Is there anything around that that you'd like to say more about?
You know, not really, other than sometimes people, so much of the time people come and they really have the desire for truth. However, their past is also very strong. And so if I help people with the nervous systems, it's because it's a part of coming to rest more deeply in our true nature. It's not like a separate piece, you know, let's just kind of work on your nervous system, but it's part of growing this capacity so that the desire for truth can really manifest, you know, that can really manifest more than when people come to satsang and they have a good experience, then they go home, they get triggered and they don't know what to do, you know. And then they feel like, oh, I lost it, you know, I can't, you know what I mean? I can't sustain it. And, you know, if they have some tools to understand, if they understand a little better, what happens when past arises? You know, can I be here? You know, for me, that's really important that people can do it on their own, you know, that they
Mhm.
understand, that they know. You know, a lot of this is education for me, you know. Let's educate everybody about this. Let's have everybody know, you know, how that works so they can, you know, do it on their own. So,
Mhm.
and sometimes these, you know, people can have a strong commitment to presence, but then they also have strong tendencies from the past, you know. And so to really sustain that commitment while the tendencies of the past are present, you know, sometimes that's what is requires to learn a little bit more about, you know, this human body, the nervous system, the brain, how it works, you know, what can be done, right, to help that. So
Yeah, yeah. As you say, that's often a missing link.
that's right. That's right.
Mhm.
Yeah. The missing link.
Well, I hear you have a meditation for us that perhaps can help us to experience some of the things that you've been talking about.
Sure, sure. Yeah, definitely. You know, when I do these guided meditations, there are two really important parts when I'm teaching. One is direct experience of presence, because that's the foundation, and the other is capacity of the nervous system to be here.
Hmm.
So when I do these meditations, I like to, you know, include both, right? So shall we just right now do it? Yes?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to.
Okay, okay. Just sitting here quietly for a moment. You can sit with your eyes closed, your eyes open, just a moment of presence. And just noticing that spaciousness of stillness. That is already here. And that it always has been, always here. And then let's also take a moment to notice the sensations that are present in your body. And if you are sitting with your eyes closed, I'm actually going to ask you to softly, gently open your eyes. You know, there is a nerve that goes from your eye into the back of your head, into the brain stem, into the brain. And the visual information is so important for the brain's ability to be here. So just whatever is present on the level of sensation, you know, no big deal. And also taking a moment to notice your environment, where you are sitting. You can even look around for a moment, like you know where you are at, but you are familiar with it, but we don't take time to look. Notice the shape and the color and texture. Even look behind you if you can. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You know, when past is present That's one of the things we can do to help the nervous system and brain to be here. Right? Beautiful, beautiful. Notice your feet on the ground or wherever they are. Maybe the weight of your body where you're sitting. Maybe your arms and your hands. Good, good, lovely, lovely. And if there's a change in your experience from doing that change, I call that capacity, growing capacity of the nervous system to be here. You know, maybe it's a little easier sitting, maybe it's a little easier breathing, or maybe there's a little more relaxation or whatever it is. Maybe tired or whatever, you know, capacity of the nervous system to be here. So good, good. And I want to continue with what I call the direct experience of presence. You can begin, actually, you can start with your eyes closed. You know, and when I say direct, I mean not through the senses, not through the mind, not as a memory, not as a sensory experience, not as a feeling. But as you are sitting here, there could be thought, feeling, sensation present, or just the spaciousness of our true nature. You know, everything that is present in your experience is okay. There is no problem with that. However, notice what would happen if you don't give your attention to what arises. You know, Papaji spoke about decision for freedom. What would happen if you just don't give your attention to what arises? And take another moment. And if it doesn't stir your mind, just see if you can direct your attention even more inward. So what is that like right now, sitting here? Brian or Jonathan, what is it like? Or anybody that is listening to this, what is it like? If you want to use a word or two to describe it, what is that like, just sitting here?
Deep peace and openness.
Deep peace and openness, beautiful, yes.
Everything is appearing in one awareness.
That's right, beautiful. Our true nature, right? Deep peace, openness, everything appears in awareness. Different words, different names for our true nature. Let's take another moment. Let's take another moment. always here. Beautiful, beautiful. And whoever is watching, you know, if anybody is watching this at home, you can do this, right? You can always do this. You can always, always come here. See, you can always come here. So like this, Jonathan, Brian, yes. What do you say? Like this? Like that? Yes. Would you be willing to do it like this?
Like you mentioned earlier, sometimes you don't want to leave, you just want to stay in that experience.
That's right. That's right. Let's just stay for another moment. Yeah. Stay here.
I'm finding words. I'm finding it challenging to come up with words.
It's not. We don't need it. We don't need it.
Mhm.
Well, that was beautiful, Neelam, and it's hard to finish the podcast, but at some point we'll have to.
I'm glad we didn't start with this.
Yeah,
Or
right. We
maybe
would
if
have
we
never
did,
said anything.
that
Yeah.
would be just it.
Yes.
Yeah, just an hour of silence.
We should
We
try
can,
that, Brian.
yeah.
We just start with this and then that's it, you know?
There is a humor. I don't know if that's the right word, but I find myself laughing. Uh, just an inner giggle that sort of arises during this, and it's not about something.
Of course, it is. Yes, it is very funny. Right. I find it very funny myself.
Yeah.
How can people find out about your satsangs and the work that you do, Neelam?
You know, we have a YouTube channel,
Mhm.
which really has a lot of videos on it. We always add some new videos. We have, I guess, I never go to social media, but we have, you know, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and of course our website. And the easiest way is, I guess, for people to just sign up for an emailing list.
Mhm.
You know, I don't schedule events far in advance. It's just my health situation, so I do it like as it comes. But when people, and of course, there's information on the website also. And when people are on our emailing list, they always will get a notification when we have new schedule. So
Mhm.
that's probably the easiest. Or the social media has schedule also. So
Okay. And thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you want to support us, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers. But it's always an honor to meet awakened folks and have this beautiful conversation. So thank you.
yes, I'm glad you are here. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you guys. Appreciate this. Yeah.
Yeah, what a delight. I so appreciate your time and spending this with you. And even though we talk about the past being present, sometimes it can be present in a good way because my fond memories of seeing in New York all came
Yes,
flooding
of
back.
course. Of course, of course. Yeah, and I appreciate you guys having me. So, yeah,
I'm going
enjoy
to go
this.
back to silence after this. So
Enjoy. Yes, take care, and I guess we'll just talk when we do.
Yeah.
yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.
Blessings to you.
Much love. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
And keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.